Hello, my friends, and welcome to today's Momentum Boost. I am, as usual, your host, Adrienne Gold Davis, and I'm really, really thrilled that you're joining me today. So, as the world watches, waits, and wonders, white knuckling it from both sides of the aisle, I was struck by a teaching that I once learned from the Talmud that I found spookily relevant at this time. It teaches that blessing from above does not rest on something that's been counted, but rather on something that's hidden from the eye. That while we think we can see and count tangibly the workings of our world, well, only God knows. And God is not tangible and is non-physical, and yet sees the entire picture, already knows the outcome. Here at Momentum, one of our core values and deepest goals is to promote unity without uniformity, which includes, of course, the upholding of human dignity at all costs. And now is a moment that, with the power of one, each and every one of us in our own personal way, in our homes, in our communities, we can model that value. My friends, I often say to you that greatness is not defined by what happens to us, but rather greatness is defined by who we are and how we react in the face of what happens to us. As King Solomon so famously said in Kohelet, which is, of course, in English, Ecclesiastes, to everything there's a season. And the band The Birds sang and made those ideas famous and told us there's a time for everything under the sun, everything under the heavens. Turn, turn, turn. And no one knows this. No one has lived this quite like we, the Jewish people. You know, we learn this lesson quite literally from the seasons themselves. That frozen ground of winter, it thaws and it shows this rebirth of spring. And the green and lush leaves of the summer months, well, they turn, turn, turn into the golds and reds and yellows of autumn before they too fall to the ground and wither. While the changing seasons might appear to be the death of the season before, really, it's the only predictable course of nature. It's just one and another phase in the turn, turn, turn of the world. So how we model our disappointments, our victories, and our responses to those of our fellows will be the ultimate test of our greatness. As Jews, we know that unity and peace between us is one of the greatest predictors of blessing coming to us from above. God asks us to love one another, regardless of whether we agree or disagree, even when we don't respect the opinions, the politic of the other, because that's what it means to be family. And we are family, we Jews, all of us. We have to ride out these seasons together with tolerance and compassion, because this too shall pass. But our family and the Jewish people, we're forever. So today, if at any time you have a question for the guest, for myself, all you have to do is click that question mark on the lower left-hand side of the chat box. But on today's boost, perfect timing, Jody Comins has returned with more strategies for ensuring healthy communication with the people we love. We're going to explore different ways to connect with our partners, with our kids, with our parents, with our extended family as well, and to learn verbal and nonverbal cues that will greatly impact our closest relationships. So Jody Comins is a divorce and family mediator and a collaborative coach. She's the author of Speaking Out, Voices of Adult Children of Divorce. Please join me in welcoming Jody Comins.
Hi, Adrienne. It's so nice to be back.
Hi,
Good
sweetie.
to see you. I got goosebumps when you were talking about all of that great stuff. I thought it would be good, even though we can't see the audience and who's here, if everybody who's listening could just put your feet on the floor. If you're comfortable, close your eyes and just take a deep breath. Hell of a day.
Whoo, baby. Yes.
Right? Doesn't that feel good? So that's just a little tip for whatever you're feeling. Stress from anything. It doesn't have to be about communication. So anyway,
Well, that's
what you got
fantastic.
for me today?
Okay, so you know what? We want some really practical tips because heaven knows we need them right now. So just give me some ideas, modalities of communication that are going to make a difference in our relationships.
Great. So
Okay.
can we have the first slide, please?
Thanks, Joan.
So we're going to talk about a few different kinds of listening skills that you can have. And the first one is, I mentioned it last week, it's listening for listening. And the idea here is that when we're talking, when we're in conversation, and you might be doing it right now, Adrian, I'm talking and you're thinking of the next question that you want to ask me, because that's what naturally happens, right? You say something, my brain goes somewhere. I think of something I want to say. I might even interrupt you because that's what we do. And so listening for listening is really trying to clear your mind, focusing on what the other person's saying and listening to what they say, waiting until they're done speaking, and then formulating your answer.
I don't know if you remember the great humorist Fran Lebowitz. She wrote a book called Metropolitan Life about 30 years ago. She said, the opposite of speaking is not listening. The opposite of speaking is waiting your turn to speak. So this really goes to that. Okay, so active listening. Yeah.
Right. So active listening. And we're I don't know if it's just a Jewish trait. I know my family, we're really good at it. I can be talking to you, but I have one ear on the conversation next to me, and I can even contribute to that conversation, come back to talk to you. That is not listening for listening, because clearly I'm not paying as much attention to you as I could be if I have an ear over there. So listening for listening, try it. Just, anyone who's out there, try it next time someone's talking to you, particularly if they've come to you with some issue, something that they are either venting about or upset about, and they're not necessarily even looking for advice. They might just be looking for someone to listen to. So that's like a very straightforward one.
I think that needs to be tattooed on my eyelids, really. Learn how to listen, because like you and my entire family, we can be doing 12 things at a time and still don't miss hearing our name from across the room. So yes, you're right.
Great. Okay. Excellent. So then we're going to talk about three other things: micromessaging, empathic listening, and narcissistic conversationalism. That's hard to say, but if we can go to the next slide, we can talk about the micromessaging. Okay, that's me, Adrian. In the practice, you asked me if that was me. So, you can't recognize me there. So typically, when we're talking about nonverbal cues, interestingly, when we talk, humans, we have 80% of our communication is nonverbal. So that means like what you just did, you made a little nod towards me that shows me that you're listening. And if you weren't listening, you might pick up your phone and start doing this. That would be a very clear signal to me that you weren't listening. And we get that a lot, right? So the micromessaging is using your body language to project either interest or disinterest. So when I'm sitting with clients, I may turn my chair I do mediation, so I have two clients at the same time. I might turn my chair and my body towards one person as they're talking to demonstrate that I'm listening to them. I nod my head. I actually have to caution my clients that I'm not agreeing with you just because I nod my head. I'm demonstrating that I'm listening. There are people who use verbal cues like, yeah. And there's some who overuse verbal cues. The people in your life who parrot what you say. You haven't even quite finished your sentence and they're saying the same exact thing as you, the same exact thing as you, same exact thing as you. Right?
Have you moved into my head? Because you're going to have to start paying rent. Really? I think you live in my brain.
Right? We all know people who do that, and they're giving their verbal feedback that they're paying attention. Sometimes it's hard for me because I talk quicker to try to get ahead of their but that's not going to work. So I do have to learn how to slow down. And we're not conscious of what we're doing always. So if you go to social work school, you learn how to be very conscious of all of your movements. So I had an advisor, a supervisor. So we have tells. If I'm going to ask a difficult question, when I was doing therapy, I would tuck my hair behind my ear. So if I was asking you about some difficulty in your life, I didn't realize it until someone brought it to my attention. My supervisor. It's like
It's
it's
like
a tell.
poker. It's like
It is
poker.
it's exactly like poker. It's a tell. So my supervisor, it was group supervision. There were 4 or 5 students in the group. And if she was asking us a difficult question, I can't demonstrate because you can only see my chest, but she would lean forward and with her legs crossed, she would pick up her foot and show us the bottom of her shoe while she leaned forward. It was such a clear tell. Like she was uncomfortable. You could see she was uncomfortable. Her whole body resonated in this discomfort.
Oh my
So
God.
pay attention to your body. If you're a nail biter, while you're talking and you're nervous, people who twirl their hair, you want to look unprofessional, twirl your hair while you're on stage.
You're right. Let me ask you
Right.
something. Somebody just wrote in a question. What happens now when people are wearing a mask and sunglasses? You can't read the eyes or the mouth.
That's why I have this picture up. So it's funny. My husband told me that he's been learning from me that I'm a very social person. You may or may not know that about me. I'm a
Really,
very
Jody?
social person. Yeah. And the mask is such an inhibitor to the way that I like to interact with the world. And so I tell people, I'm smiling at you. Now, the first time I did that, my family looked at me like, you're so weird. I said, well, you can't tell, especially if I'm wearing sunglasses. You really can't tell. There's no nonverbal cue on that face there. It's cute. The Hadassah mask, the sunglasses, the frizz. But unless I tell you, so I was taking my daughter to school. We were in New Orleans. It was in August. And we got on a bus. Normally, like we're all nervous. We're freshman parents. We're moving our kids in. We'd all be looking at each other going, ooh, ooh, or
Right.
smiling. I did. I looked right at someone and I said, I'm smiling at you. And she said, oh, and we started a conversation. So apparently my husband has been telling people that I do this. So it is now a verbal cue to describe my nonverbal cue.
I am so stealing that, Jody. Oh
You can
my.
have it.
Okay. So that's
You can
good.
have it.
Okay, keep going. Keep going because this
Okay,
is
so that's the micro messaging. I think that one of the things, if we were in person, I would have everybody stand up and do a little one-on-one where you welcome somebody to momentum or to an experience, and it would
right.
be in a positive way. And then we'd call out, how did that feel? What was that like? And you'd say, she smiled at me, she hugged me, she made me feel welcome through her body language and her words. And then I would do a second example of being unwelcoming. And the first time I ever did this exercise, I wanted to cry after because it was so hard for me to be unkind and unwelcoming. But the way that you do that, really, with this little device, you can just pretend, oh, yeah, it's nice to see you. Well, thanks for coming. Sorry, I just have to check we all know, everybody on here knows how icky you feel when somebody is paying more attention to their phone than the person they're conversing with.
It's interesting. You call this a micro message, and I'm going to think about it as a microaggression because in some ways,
Yeah.
sometimes people do it purposefully. It's like
Mhm.
a passive aggressive or a directly microaggression.
Yeah, it
So
absolutely is a microaggression, and there's a macroaggression. There are macroaggressions too, which are even bigger ways of sending the message that
give me
you're
an
not
example of what does that look like?
Oh, no, like you would just walk away. I mean, somebody comes up to you and tries to engage you in conversation, and you just literally turn your back on them and walk away. That would be pretty macro,
Oh,
right?
got it.
I
Okay,
know.
keep going.
I
Sorry.
know.
Go.
No, don't be sorry. I think that the ideas behind using our body language and our, even just paying attention. I see my hands popping into the screen. So I like to play with a little scrap of paper. It just keeps my hands busy. So noticing what we look like when we're talking to people. Zoom is great for seeing what you look like when you talk to people. I hide my self view all the time on Zoom because I don't really want to look at myself while I'm talking to you or clients or other people because then I'm paying too much attention to my micro cues and not enough attention to the conversation.
That's a really good idea. I didn't realize you could hide your own view. I think that would make a huge difference for a lot
Yeah,
of
it's
people.
called hide self-view. So you can't do it here, but if you're in Zoom, there's a little dot. You click the 3 dots and you go to hide self-view. It's amazing. It makes you feel like you're one-on-one or one-on-2 with some people in the room. Our brains can't do 2 things at once. So,
Right.
well, some things, but it's hard to focus. You don't look in the mirror while you're talking to your friends, right? How would that would be a real macroaggression if we all held up a mirror while we're in conversation.
Okay, so we're talking about physical and non-physical, verbal and nonverbal cues and tells and
Mhm.
things like that that we need to be conscious of. I imagine it would be useful to ask somebody to watch you for a period of time to see if they can determine them. I think most children would be able to tell their parents what their nonverbal cues are. My kids used
Yeah.
to say, all the time. You go like this, Mom. With your
Yeah.
teeth. Clench your teeth.
My mother used
They
to
go,
do that. I think, yeah, she's not on right now. My sister's on, but she used to go like this. It was like this
Yeah.
with the teeth, and then a grab of the arm. Sorry, Mom. I have to tell people. It's how we parent, right? So we all have them.
Okay, go on. Take it your way. Go ahead.
I think we can go to the next slide. We're going to talk about the next topic. Okay.
Oi. Wait, did we do an art of listening?
This one. Yep. So this is more of, I tried so hard to find a picture of me listening. That one's pretty good. That's me and my girls when they were much younger. So we watched a fun video last week. It's called, It's Not About the Nail. You can look it up on YouTube. And basically it's a woman who had a nail on her forehead and she's telling her partner, we assume it's her partner, that he's not listening because he keeps trying to give her advice. And so usually what I do is I run through how to be an empathic listener alongside that video. So we're not going to show it again. The idea here is that somebody comes to you with an issue and we immediately want to move into advice mode. It's what we do as parents, as partners, as friends. We think that they're coming and asking for advice. Generally, people just want to be heard. We want to vent. We want to talk it through. We want to process something difficult that happened. So to be a good empathic listener is through these simple steps. So the first one is to pay attention, and you can use some of the micro cues that we talked about to show if you're in person, by nodding your head, maybe asking clarifying questions, but maybe just waiting and listening. If you're not together, if you're on the phone, you use the mm-hmm or uh-huh. In Philadelphia, they have more of a, I forget, my brother's mother-in-law used to do one that sounded a little different. A. She used to say A.
That's Canadian, my friend. That's very Canadian.
Is it Canadian? So
Yeah,
maybe Canadian, right? A. So paying attention, first and foremost. Pay attention. What's the person telling you? Remain neutral. So not taking sides. And I think a lot of times when we think we're giving advice, we take the person's side that we're talking to. And in doing so, we can say negative things about the other person that the situation happened with, or the institution that they were upset with, or something else. And I found sometimes that feeds the fire towards what they're feeling, and that's not what they're looking for. So remaining neutral and just empathizing with them and how they're feeling, having nothing to do with the other person.
So would you
That was
say
a good
that
micro too. What did you want to ask?
Thank you. So that's like, it's not colluding. And it also, from a Jewish perspective, prevents lashon hara, evil speech, gossip, that sort of thing, because what you're doing is listening to someone's heart as opposed to getting into the dirt of it with them. Hard to do because most of us have a hard time separating between sympathy and empathy. Could you actually speak to that, the difference between sympathy and empathy?
Yeah, I love what you just said. And Ruchi, I told you last week, I go to Ruchi's Torah class. Ruchi's another trip leader that is as beloved as you. And she was talking about how when we don't engage in gossip, that it's good for the soul, right? Because by not doing it, it's better for you. And okay, the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is when you feel bad for somebody. So trying to think of an example. Sympathy is that you're like paying condolences. I sympathize with your situation.
While I'm waiting for her to come back on, I'm going to flesh out the sympathy empathy thing in a way that I heard.
And so remembering that we only have to deal with our own feelings. Okay, Adrienne must have lost her internet, so I'll just keep talking. Tal, can we get a slide, or is that still available to us? Yes, okay. So we're going to keep going with this art of listening. So, stay on that slide, thanks. So after we've heard what the person's talking about, they've had an opportunity to vent and get it all out, we can rephrase and empathize with some of the things that they've been telling us. and doing so by asking open-ended questions. And so the difference between an open-ended question and a closed-ended question. A closed-ended question is one where the answer might be yes or no. Did you have a good day at school today? Yes or no. That's not going to get any more information out of a kid who doesn't like to talk. Instead, you could ask, what did you do at school today? Now, they still might say nothing, but you can pull on that. What kinds of things did you do at school today? How was your day today? Right? So asking open-ended questions about the situation. At the end of all of that, it's an opportunity to join in and problem solve. So I'm in the divorce field. If a child comes to a parent with an issue about something that's happening in their other house, rather than getting on the phone and calling the other parent and saying, why did you do this? And why did you do that? And it's not fair and everything else. As the parent, you can listen to the kids, help them think through their problem, and help them figure out how to advocate for themselves so that they can talk to the other parent about the situation that's been bothering them. Perfect timing. Let's finish talking about the art of listening.
Okay. So where are we at now? I mean, I noticed a slide earlier about narcissistic issues. It's a word
Yep.
that's thrown around a great deal, Jody. You hear it a lot. It's a clinical diagnosis, and I know it's on a continuum, but it's often used inappropriately. So maybe when you go through this, you can specifically speak to that as well.
Okay, so next slide, please, Tom. So this is a little different than the diagnosis. Narcissism is, I don't have the DMV open in front of me, but it's when somebody is just so engrossed in themselves that they actually, going back to your previous question, don't have the ability to have empathy for how others are feeling. So that's, and we see that example in a lot of places and a lot of people. Narcissistic conversationalism, which is, you could say that 10 times fast, is more about the kind of people who auto shift the conversation to themselves. So I come to you and say, Adrian, I had such a hard day. And you say, your day? Wait till you hear about my day.
Oh, I hate that. Oh,
right.
Oh, I hate that. Yeah.
Well, you've cut me off at the pass because I came to you to try to talk to you about something. And instead, I'm going to get an earful about you. So but what happens is you want to have what's called a support response. So when we're in conversation like we are now, a little different because you're interviewing me, but I would say something, you would say something. We would go back and forth in support of each other. And it's okay if what you say reminds me of something that happened in my life, as long as I'm not taking over the conversation and making it about me. A shift response is when somebody does that. So,
is there a way to shut down a shift response?
Yeah, you bring it back to yourself. So this happens in my family sometimes. I'll call my mom and she doesn't even say hello. She just jumps right into what she wants to say because she's probably excited that I called her. And I'll say, wait, Mom, I called you. Let me tell you my stuff first and then we can get to you. So that's an easy one. She wasn't being aggressive about it. But there are people who, I shared this at a Empowering Women luncheon once, and somebody said she has a friend who did it so often that she started to avoid her phone calls. And I suggested that maybe she talk to the friend and let her know, listen, every time we speak, I feel like you steer the conversations back to your family, your situation, your everything. And I want a little airtime. So maybe we could take turns talking about our families and our jobs and our life.
So I wonder whether a person who does that generally, and that you had to speak to that way, whether they'd be capable of even hearing it, because they're not necessarily a narcissist. Perhaps they are just unaware.
So yeah, and not everybody's good at conversation. I had a friend in 7th grade that we used to call him 110% because anything that I did, he did better, or his sister did better, or his mother did better. And he's a dear guy. I still am friends with him. That was just, we learn how to talk from our parents. We learn how to talk from TV and movies and books and things. And each one of us has our own way of interacting with others. So for most people are very unaware that they're doing this. And I think if you were to suggest to them that this might be happening, they'd be very open to shifting how they actually interact with you.
Beautiful, judging favorably, Jody. Big mitzvah there. Judging favorably. Okay, so keep going. Support response, take over the conversation.
Yeah. So like I said, it's taking the focus back to you. It's subtle, it's unconscious. We can be aware of it though. I was running a call a few weeks ago and I had a loss in my family and I wasn't mentioning it in a lot of places. And when a woman got on my call, she was in tears and she had lost, her cousin had died that day. And I didn't say, oh, I know how you feel. My cousin died last week, because that would be a shift response. That would be me taking away from her moment. I wasn't in tears at that moment. I wasn't upset at that moment. You know, it was in my life, but it had happened a week ago. And so I was there to support her and everything that happened with her. A week later, when we were in our meeting again, we talked about it. I checked in with her, how she was doing. And then I did share that I had a recent loss. So it's understanding the appropriateness of when we share our stuff. And then you have to be careful to not ever, don't be the one who never shares anything. That's happened to me too, where I find that I'm so busy supporting everybody else that I forget to also ask for help when I need it.
You know, Jody, there's this Jewish concept called bittul. It means that you retract yourself somewhat. It goes to reducing ego and humility. You get out of your own way. You make yourself it less about you. And in doing so, you open up the opportunity for the other to feel seen and heard. And humility is at the root of, I think, exactly what you're talking about. I can't express enough how grateful I am for these really clear tips. So keep going.
Great. Okay. I think we're ready for the next slide. Okay, so this was a big question that came up last week. And when you and I talked or debriefed after, and we talked about agreeing to disagree, and I know we had some comments about it too. The idea that you could agree and disagree. And does that mean that you're shutting off conversation? If I said, let's just agree to disagree.
Right.
That might feel like you're shutting it down. So you and I talked about how the concept of agreeing to disagree for now, because it's heated in the moment. And so I told you this earlier. Rabbi Mark Baker, who is the head of our Jewish Federation here in Boston, and he's one of my people that I just love, one of my rabbis, he sends out a Shabbat message. And the last 2 weeks when I've been invited to speak here, he has written something that perfectly aligned with what I wanted to say. So this week I found this nugget where he said we can fervently disagree and give one another the benefit of the doubt at the same time.
Whew. So I want to comment on that for a minute if I can. So
Sure.
I mean, first of all, it's a true, absolutely true statement, and can go in another direction too. We can fervently disagree and judge favorably at the same time, because sometimes giving someone the benefit of the doubt might imply what you said made you sound like a jerk, but I'm going to assume that you didn't mean it that way. Whereas judging favorably would be something like, what you said made you sound like a jerk, but I know that you're not a jerk. I know that you're a good person, so I'm going to dig deeper. So this is a very, very strong bouncing off point. And I would imagine that this responds to when things get heated and you need to turn down the heat, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So I have some tips on that if you want, how to turn down the heat. Okay. So a few different things. One, so last week, all the great momentum teachers were on together, and Lori talked about how she wrote this on Facebook. She said, when my husband very rarely, she wrote, when he very rarely disagrees with me or doesn't like something that happened, he waits 24 hours before he talks to me about it. And the concept of time, letting some time pass before approaching something. So, we can take a beat, take that moment. If we come at somebody when we're actually upset with them, it tends to be back to that using of I statements. But if you come at someone and say, you did this, or you were late and you didn't call, and you, that's asking for an argument. You could approach it a different way, that when this happened, I felt upset. Yesterday, when you didn't take out the garbage, I was, whatever. So that's an example. So that's one way, is taking some time. There's the idea of recognizing when you need a break, and it doesn't have to be 24 hours, but it could be that you're in the heat of an argument and you're just going back and forth and around, and you say to the person, listen, I'm not walking away because I don't, I'm not saying I don't want to talk about this anymore, but I can't talk about this right now. I need to take a break and go for a walk around the block, do something. You could even go for a walk around the block together, actually, but in silence. And sometimes spending that time together without talking about the topic could be helpful. When my kids were little, I remember reading something that said, if your kids have an argument, this mom would do it, and I tried it and it worked. If your kids have an argument, take off their socks and shoes and make them sit barefoot with their feet up against each other. And there's no way that they won't make up quickly. What if we did that as grown-ups?
Oy vey. Oh, and you know what? That's a very interesting idea. But Jody, I'd like to do it with you first, okay? But really, I've been wearing the same pajama bottoms for a week now, and my feet are kind of stinky. So, like, let's wait till after COVID, and we'll do it
Okay.
together. I wish
Okay.
we had more time, but we do not. And Jody, I have to say that you have such a clear, articulate, real approach to this. I feel like I learned an awful lot today, and I'm very grateful to you for that. I want to thank you, and on behalf of all of us, thank you for sharing your insights with us today.
You're welcome. It was great to be here. Thank you so much.
Bless your heart. So this conversation's been so insightful, and there have been a lot of questions and comments, obviously, that I didn't get to raise, and I'm sorry. So we'd love to have it back in the future, but as of now, make sure you join me on November 6th, because we're having a special musical, spiritual, and creative experience with Grammy and Emmy nominated musician Peter Himmelman. So with the use of like thought-provoking insights and stunning music, he helps us explore our authentic selves and admit life's, ups and downs, helps us go into Shabbat, allowing us to access the creativity that can make us feel ready for that beautiful pause between the notes that is Shabbat. So we're going to cap off this intense week with energy, positivity, and connection. To register for our upcoming boost, you just click the link that's above me right now, or visit momentumunlimited.org. And please don't forget to respond in this poll that's going to come up on your screen after our short video. So for me, Adrienne, and all of us at Momentum, remember, as we learn and grow together, to everything there is a season under the sun. Hold on. Thank you. See you soon.